My name is Clarice Schmid. I have 4 children, Goldie Jane, Cliff, Marvin, and Sydney, and we live on the ranch on the mesa. Every time my grandson Zachary comes to visit, he peppers me with questions about life in the old days. He got me thinking, maybe I should write down my memories, because sometimes I wonder if anyone will remember my family or our way of life here. We're ranchers, mountain ranchers, rich in land and family and memories. But there's only a few of us left. Most folks have had to sell out just to pay Uncle Sam. I don't want this to happen to us. I want my children to keep the ranch intact. It breaks my heart to think our mesa might one day be broken into subdivisions. But you know, it wasn't always this way here. I remember the day I first saw the mesa. It was 65 years ago, and I was only 15 years old. I was Clarice Campbell back then. My mother, 4 sisters, and 1 brother lived at the old Swinford place, where the faraway ranch is now. The house we moved into was 2 rooms with an attic and a lean-to shed on the back. We had an old beat-up wood cook stove and a wood heater in the living room. It got pretty cold in the wintertime. The Schmids owned the ranch above us. Grandfather Schmid homesteaded the ranch back in 1882. My children are proud of our heritage.
My great-granddad was Champlin, and my great-great-grandfather was Wells. These old cowboys that came in, I mean, they built the West. They're the ones that did it.
The Schmids were mentioned a lot in the newspaper we used to have up here. It was handwritten and passed from family to family. There were 3 Schmid boys, Everett, Orville, and Paul. Everett dated my sister Evelyn. Orville dated Daisy Williams, and that left Paul Schmid for me, Clarice Campbell. Sweet 16, and I was in love. The courtship began. We went for rides in the buggy and went horseback riding. If you've never courted horseback, well, that's the way to go. We'd ride away from Mama on 2 different horses, and as soon as we got out of sight, we'd lead one horse and ride double on the other one. I had Paul's arms around me all the time. Life couldn't have been better. Paul soon asked me to marry him. So, on the 14th of December 1934, just 2 days after my 17th birthday, we were married. Weddings were always fun up here on the mesa, with fiddles and dancing and our mountains in the background. Of course, after our wedding, the kids came along. Jane was born on September 20 at the upper place. The trees were golden, so the doctor said, "Name her Goldie." So Goldie Jane it was, but we always called her Jane. Clifford was born on the 4th of April, 1938. There was 4 feet of snow, and Clifford was born 30 minutes before the doc got there, so Dad Schmid and Paul delivered him. Spring was always welcome. We were so tired of snow and cold weather. All the wildflowers started to bloom, the trees were leaving, and our grass started to grow. After a long snowy winter, all seemed really good. Little fawns and calf elk were everywhere. We were always busy in the spring. We had 60 head of sheep, so we had to take care of little lambs. We also had baby calves to care for, grain to plant, as well as a big garden. I got to love the mesa more and more. In my early years in the family, we branded at the upper place. It had good corrals around the haystack yard and the cow shed. The day before the branding, the cows had to be rounded up and brought into a pasture near the house. The little kids would catch the littler calves. They had quite a time holding the calves, so some of the men would help them. The bigger calves were roped and held by horses. We always had a crowd of people on Brandon Day. Everyone had a good time.
My earliest memories of life on the ranch is all of us working together. If it was branding, we were all there. Or if it was getting hay, we all worked together. I can remember helping Mom in the kitchen, getting potatoes peeled or whatever needed to be done. We all worked together, the whole family.
I'm the youngest of 4 children, Paul and Claire Schmid. And the things that I learned on this ranch are the things that have taken me through my life. My dad taught me to work with my hands, with building engines, taking them apart and putting them together, machinery. And my mom taught me how to sew. I've made shirts, I've knitted caps. I'm proud of these things, but they're all part of the things that you need to know when you live off of the land. Whenever one of us get hurt, well, it was too far to take us to town to the doctor, so if we got a cut or an abrasion of some sort, my dad always took us in, laid us out on the kitchen table and sewed us up. And my mom always passed out.
We bring the kids up to the ranch to teach them what ranching life in the mountains is like. We think education is important.
Here's where you store the vegetables. And this is where I keep the draft horses for the sleigh rides in the wintertime.
We have sleigh rides now up on the mesa. The tourists get to see the ranch in winter, and the money sure helps.
You know, one reason it really pleases me to think about the Schmid Ranch being preserved as it is today, and as it's been for the last 100 years, is because it's such a complete sort of Rocky Mountain subalpine ecosystem. The meadows, the forest, all the wetlands. I studied natural science, biology, wildlife ecology in school, and when I started going up there, I thought, this is just the perfect Rocky Mountain outdoor classroom. It's got everything that you could think of, both in flora and fauna, and demonstrating and learning about how this lush Rocky Mountain mesa land is put together. And it's there. It's all there, and we ought to keep it like that.
Marvin was born on August 4, 1943, and just 15 months later, Cindy came along. The boys are all grown now, and not all of them still live on the mesa, but they all know the importance of this place. All the old families on the mesa started to move away, and new folks came.
We have a neighbor there now, one of the more rich people from back east, that built a house right in the middle of the place where the elk have to go through, or used to go through. So now they have to detour about a mile because they won't go past the house. So they detour around to get into the canyon, and if we lose our ranch, they lose.
I remember my uncles, both Everett and Orville. Everett was the quieter one, but Orville was like always a big brother, an uncle, a second father, all wrapped up in one.
It seems everyone loved Orville, even the new folks. He was born on the mesa and loved it. The land and his sheep and cows were very dear to him. In the 70s, some young people came and lived on the upper place. They were so different from any of the folks around here. Talked different and sure looked different. Orville didn't care. He made friends with them and taught them a thing or two about ranching life.
And Lee told me this, Lee Lewin, recently. She was off with Orville fixing fence in one of the remote parts of the ranch, kind of in a steep ravine. And as they were working, Orville dropped his hammer and went down the ravine quite a ways. And it wasn't going to be convenient at all for either one of those folks to go get it. So Orville says, Blondie, get the hammer. And Blondie, the dog, took off right down this ravine, rooted through some things, picked up the hammer, brought it back, and it was just the most natural thing in the world for Orville. And it was to me, it would be like telling the dog, and why don't you do the farm budget while you're at it too?
Before my Uncle Orville died, he had requested that he have a simple funeral and be buried in a pine box. I went down to the mortuary and ordered up a pine box. And they asked me what century I thought it was. We then decided to make the casket. My younger brother Sid did the services, and we had a homemade funeral. And we buried him up there in the ranch within a mile of where he was born. My desire is to carry on my Uncle Orville's will, and that was his desire, to maintain this ranch as a working ranch forever, and I'm dedicated to doing that.
Orville left the Mesa to my kids, and we want to keep this place as a working ranch. We want the elk and the deer to have a place where they feel safe.
What I think is important is that we can save that land, and by saving that land, maybe someone else can save their land, and then someone else, and then maybe we can preserve a way of life that should be preserved. If you like what the big four gas companies did to the price of gas 8 years ago, you'll just love what they're going to do to the price of food when they take over all the food production.
Facing our mountain, I sometimes sketch, but so much has changed. The changes are hard for me to take. Before, I could look out my door and see wild animals. Now I see houses. I see a blue-roofed house across the way and more houses on the skyline. I am 80 years old now. I have my home, my family, and memories of my life here. I hope you know by now, we instilled in our children a love of the land. They all love the Mesa with our mountains as the backdrop. My kids are trying hard to keep our place intact the way it always was. They are trying to keep the fields green, the fences up, and the house and barn in repair. They are trying hard to keep alive a way of life that honors the land.
Sometimes I wonder just for what